car to be serviced at a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Maybe don't say Starbucks.
Oh! Oh! Frig! He was right in my face that time.
Yeah, he was.
And you guys all caught that on film. We all have a mom and dad. This is one of the few things that each and every one of us have in common. And it was the union of those two, gross, I know, so stop thinking about it, but it's their union that brought each of us into this world. Now, I know that not all of us have both of our biological parents in our lives right now. Some may have left, or some are no longer maybe alive. Some of you may not even know who your biological parents are, but each of us still have someone in our lives who right now takes the place as parent to each of us. No parents are perfect. The sooner you understand that, the better. Parents are people who, as one with a bit of experience, are making it up on the go. We will all make mistakes along the way. Parents are not perfect, just like you are not perfect. This is something we can all admit if we're being really honest, couldn't we? The problem, though, is that most times during our teenage years, we don't want to admit this. But I know, if I look back on my own life, I can think of countless examples when my parents actually had good advice that I didn't follow that led to me having to learn a hard lesson. My dad used to continually tell me that I needed to wear a helmet when we rode our quads, even if it was just for a short ride. I remember one time, only 15 minutes after he had told me that, I found myself flat on my back after my quad had flipped over backwards. I landed 12 feet down the hill, and fortunately my brain was still intact, but I was pretty badly shaken up. We certainly do question our parents at times, don't we? One summer after high school, I was working away from home in the oil and gas industry. And for an entire month, I lived in a hotel room by myself in Slave Lake, Alberta. And it just so happened that while I was staying in this hotel, I turned 21 years old. It was a moment I'll never forget. The day of my birthday, I went down to the hotel restaurant to have dinner, just like I had done every other night. And on this particular night, the hostess of the restaurant looked at me a little bit sideways and asked, "Are you the one staying in room 204? I replied with confusion, "Yes." She then responded by saying, "Okay, we know who you are and we know what today is." Oh no. Sure enough, at the end of my meal, sitting at my table in the middle of the restaurant all by myself, 3 of the girls working at the restaurant come out from the back with a piece of cake on it and a sparkler on top burning down while they sang "Happy Birthday" to me. Now, keep in mind, I was all alone. The entire restaurant was looking at me with this cake sitting in front of me and this happy birthday song being sung. They must have thought I was either a total weirdo or an egotistical maniac who had to just point out to the staff, "Hey, just so you guys know, today's my birthday." And besides that, what normal person would do that and then sit by themselves in a hotel restaurant on their 21st birthday? And it didn't help that the sparkler on the cake seemed to burn 3 times longer than most sparklers, as I just sat there with this fake grin on my face, watching it finish its burn, with this awkward silence that hung over the room as they finished their rendition of "Happy Birthday." After dinner, I went back up to my room, super embarrassed, and then phoned my mom, who was eager to ask me, "Did you get my surprise?" I get it. Parents can be embarrassing. Now, I don't know what your story is. Maybe you have a great relationship with your parents, full of love and good communication. Your relationship may be strained or broken. Perhaps you don't even know who your biological parents are, or you don't really love them right now. They may embarrass you or disappoint you or neglect your needs or whatever. Regardless of whether we think they don't know anything or don't understand us or are embarrassing to us, They are our parents. And the Bible's actually pretty clear on what our relationship with them is supposed to look like. Now, I want you to come along and be part of this conversation, even if the thought of talking about all of this has you cringing. Just hear me out for a few minutes. If I were to sum up our conversation with one statement, it would go like this: you honor God when you honor the parents that He gave you. The Bible describes that our relationship with our parents is directly related to our relationship with God. And if that's the case, we need to take our relationship with our parents really seriously. Our parents are and always will be the number one influencers in our lives. We take our cues from them, good or bad, and our relationship with them will shape us more than any other relationship we'll ever have in our lives. If we go all the way back to Exodus 20, we'll discover that in the context of God sharing His famous 10 commandments, He commands His people to honor your father and your mother. It's right there in the middle of the things like stealing and murder and adultery. Later, in the next verse, He describes that a child who strikes his father or mother or even dishonors his father or mother must be put to death. So as you can see, for God, this is really a big deal. Now, much later in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul reaches back to this and again reminds the early church that he started in Ephesus the exact same thing. And for Paul, the idea of his church people honoring their parents was a really big deal as well. So much so that in Romans 1 and 2 Timothy 3, Paul listed dishonor of parents along with things such as hatred, murder, deceit, gossip, pride, and arrogance. He put it like this to his church in Ephesus: children, obey your parents because you belong to the Lord. For this is the right thing to do. Honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise. If you honor your father and mother, things will go well for you and you will have a long life on the earth. Now, the first thing I notice in this passage is that Paul's being really pointed with his argument. He tells the church to obey their parents because they belong to the Lord. They're found in the family of God and are to honor and obey the family of this world. Now, if we call ourselves Christians, we can't escape this call on our lives today either. Paul goes on to describe that this was the first commandment with a promise. And what he's doing here is he's looking back to Exodus 20, in which God has given His commandments. And while each one of those commandments was prescriptive, it was this one, honor your father and your mother, that came along with a bit of a footnote. Specifically, that if you do, things will go well for you and you'll have a long life on the earth. So what does he mean by this? We need to start by breaking down what it is that he's describing. First, he says that things will go well for you. Now, I think what Paul's getting at here is just really basic and practical stuff. The Bible's actually full of really practical and simple wisdom, and this is one of those moments. And we need to get this right. We need to know that when we honor and obey our parents, things are just going to be a whole lot easier. Many of us have lived or are currently living a difficult reality because we're pushing back on our parents. And Paul here is saying, hey, you want things to be a little bit easier and simpler? Listen to what your parents have to say. As a parent myself, I'm learning more and more that your parents actually have some wisdom wrapped up inside of them. I know for some of you that's really shocking to imagine, but they really were your age once. They have actually walked the roads that you've walked and are walking and will walk, and God has given them to you to help you along your journey now as well. And in most cases, and I know that there are some exceptions, not only do your parents know what's best for you, but they also have your best interests in mind. Think of it like this. When my truck is broken down, I'm not gonna take my car and hand it over to a barista at a coffee shop. I'm gonna go to a mechanic who knows what he's talking about, who knows what he's looking for to try and diagnose the problem with my vehicle. It's the same with our parents. Whether we like to believe it or not, they usually do know what's best because they know us best. So practically speaking, Paul says, life is just going to be easier for you when you honor your parents. Now, the second half of what Paul says is that when you honor your parents, that you'll have a long life here on the earth, or your translation might say in the land. Now, Paul's not saying that if you dishonor your parents, they'll make your life on earth shorter. Remember, Paul's reaching back to Exodus when he makes this statement. And in Exodus, the promise of honoring your parents was connected to the promise of the promised land. So what this means is that in order for the people of Israel to experience the promised land that God was leading them to, they had these guidelines or commandments to follow, one of which was to honor your parents. So as an expert on the Jewish law and history, Paul understood this very well. He also understood the new reality of Jesus. And although that we're no longer awaiting the promised land in our inheritance from the Lord, we instead are promised everlasting life and intimacy with God. Now, Paul's not saying that you have to honor your parents or else you cannot receive God's love or grace. That would be backwards. The gift of God's love and grace is always totally free. But what Paul is saying is that the way you honor your parents is actually evidence that you do love and are obedient to Jesus. Another way to put it again is like this: you honor God when you honor the parents He gave you. So how practically do we go about doing that? Let me give you 3 ideas. First, honor your parents by obeying them. We start off our relationship with our parents by needing to listen to what they say. When we're young children, they have to give us instruction in order to help protect us. They tell us things like, don't touch the stove, and if we listen to them, we actually won't get burnt. As we get older, we start to push back on the instruction, and this starts to get a little bit trickier. I trust their instructions after my hand has been burnt, but what about when they try to tell me to come home a little bit too early, or try to keep me from certain places or being with certain people? At the core, I need to obey my parents willingly and immediately, and also cheerfully. I need to do so without being told many times, and with a heart that says, you're my dad, or you're my mom, and for that reason, I will obey. Here's the deal. How you respond to your parents is directly connected to how you will respond to those who are in authority over you for the rest of your life. Those who don't ever learn this and push back on their parents constantly and fight with them and live a life where they just want to disobey them often grow up to be adults who will push back on every single position of authority later in their lives. They struggle in school because they push back against their teachers and their administrators. They struggle in the workforce because they push back against their bosses. And they'll struggle with the law because they push back against law enforcement. Our obedience to our parents is actually something we need to learn and practice because it's directly connected to how we will live in the world beyond our homes. So we honor our parents by obeying them. Secondly, you honor your parents by listening to them. Proverbs 13:1 says that wise children listen to their parents and that foolish children do their own thing. And when I say listen to your parents, what I mean is to put yourself in a posture that says, I trust you, and I believe that you know best and have my best interests in mind, and therefore I want to listen to you. It's a child who longs to learn who their parents are and how it is that they see the world and what plans it is that they see for their children. So what do we do, though, if our parents are not Christians? Really simply, the command from God and the instructions from Jesus and Paul, they don't differentiate. Parents are parents, whether they love and serve the Lord or not. After working 2 summers serving at a Bible camp, I'll never forget when the director of the camp actually told me that I needed to take a summer off and not work at the camp at all because he had known that I had turned my dad down twice to come and work for him up in the oil field. Now, it didn't make any sense to me. I felt like at the camp I was doing the Lord's work, but that summer, the director of that camp taught me that honoring my parents is also the Lord's work, even though they didn't follow Jesus for themselves. Paul again makes it very clear in Colossians 3 that our obedience to our parents is obedience to the Lord. Third, you honor your parents by respecting them. At its core, respecting your parents means accepting them and forgiving them. Respect doesn't mean that we become blind to their flaws. Most of you watching this are teenagers, and so I know that you're very aware at this stage of your lives of all of your parents' flaws. Respect means to accept them as your parents, whom God has given you. That's what I mean when I've been saying you honor God by honoring the parents that He gave you. It's trusting and believing that God actually knew what He was doing when He placed you in their hands and in their care and in their home and under their wisdom and support and instruction. Respect means that we're quick to forgive them, even when they blow it, even when they hurt you or let you down or disappoint you. They are human, just like us, and capable of not getting it right. They're just as able as you and I to do things wrong and to hurt others along the way. We honor God when we honor the parents that He gave us. And we honor our parents by obeying them, by listening to them, and respecting them. And this is the invitation that all of us are brought into. Now, here's the deal. I know that in a conversation like this can stir up a lot of emotions. And for some of us who are listening to this conversation right now, you might be feeling a little bit convicted. Maybe because right before you came to small group or to your house or to your youth ministry or wherever it is that you're watching this, you know that on the way to this conversation, you might have dishonored your mom or your dad. You might have fought in the car or had it out at home or whatever the case might be. You might be in a place right now where you feel really distant from your parents and you've pulled yourself away from relationship a little bit. Maybe you've said some things and done some things to try and hurt them because you feel like they've hurt you and you feel bad about it right now. And so the invitation I want to give you is, how about tonight we take one step towards trying to make it a little bit better? And so here's my challenge for you. And it might look different for all of you depending on where it is that you're at. But my challenge to you is to do something, to say something to your mom and dad that communicates, I want to honor God. And in doing so, I'm going to do my best to honor you because you are the mom and dad that He's given me. So maybe it means for some of you right now, you're going to pull out your cell phone and you're going to put together a text message that you're going to send off to your mom or your dad, where you're just going to air out some of the laundry. You're going to make things right. You're going to apologize. You're going to own what you need to own because you can only really work on and fix yourself. Maybe for some of you, it means you want to do something extravagant. You want to go on Instagram and post a picture of your mom or your dad and let your whole community know, hey, I love these people and I'm actually really invested in this relationship with these two who've invested their lives into me. Maybe it means you're going to write a letter. You're going to pull some pages out of your journal and you're going to put something together, pen to paper, where you can, again, just communicate this desire for a deeper relationship, a restoration of reconciliation with your mom or your dad. Whatever it is, wherever it is that you are and what you need to do, I want to invite you at this time to take a moment to do just that and to respond.